Our presenter today is Monica Shah, who is an OUBS alumni. Monica founded her independent preschool for expatriate children, Children's First Association, in 2006, starting with 5 children in 2 rooms. She now manages operations for up to 40 children and leads service development in a 20-room villa in Zurich, which is pretty impressive. I will now hand over to Monica, who will tell you a little bit more about her background. So over to you, Monica.
Hi, Janet. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Thank you, Monica.
Good. So, the first thing I want to say is welcome to my first webinar. If you've got feedback for me, do tell us, because I haven't done this before, so it's a good experience for me and I hope it will be interesting for everyone. The first aspect of this, of course, is telling you what I actually achieved in the last 10 years, because it certainly was a little hair-raising at times. If you decide you want to start something up abroad, there's a certain amount you just cannot know. There are certain environmental factors that are really beyond research. But there's a lot that you can find out in advance. And I suppose one of the main things that I want to come to in the course of today is how you can do it. We'll all be coming from different perspectives, perhaps with different kinds of startups in mind. Mine was a socially entrepreneurial move, because my background was in education, mental health, social services, and I've done the certificate Fundamentals in Senior Management through the OU. So I was really keen to use my previous experience, but in an international environment, where I found myself in Switzerland, a mother of a very young child. He was 4 when we came to Zurich, and I'm pretty proud of what I did, or what I have done so far, because I know that I got through his early years while running my own organisation, and it seems to me that this has been a kind of dream job, a dream job for a mum, a dream job if you find yourself in an unusual international situation. How can you make good? So it does feel like it has been successful. So the first thing I'd like to do is show you a little bit about the school, because the most of the talk is going to be about startups and not about my particular school. So just to give you an idea, I'm going to go straight through to the first slide about Children's First Association. It was meant to be called Preschool Partnership because I wanted to emphasize that very young children grow up in partnership between their school and their home influences. But this name wasn't allowed by the Swiss authorities, because under the legal definition for a partnership, it has to be a business partnership if you use that word. So I had to go to Plan 2, which was to find another name that represented my concept. And the Plan B was to try and capture something about why I thought I could do this better than other people could do it, and why I felt confident to do it. And a lot of that came from my reading when I was still in England about things that go wrong. What can go wrong in a hospital, what can go wrong in a school, and why is life really difficult when you're head of a school sometimes. And yeah, there are a lot of examples of when the children are not put first, when people have their own agendas, whether that be teachers or school authorities or politicians, or actually the parents can themselves be putting themselves first. For example, they want convenient childcare and they don't really care about the education. So there were lots of reasons why I chose the name Children First, and I made it a non-profit because it was a legal vehicle that I had experience of. I used to work in the charity sector in the UK, and I needed to find something that would be manageable for me in a German-speaking environment. So Zurich is German-speaking. German is one of 4 national languages, but one of 3 main languages. And it was absolutely bad luck that I ended up in the German-speaking part, because I already spoke French, but I didn't end up in the French-speaking part. So when you're looking at translations of legal documents or policies or local regulations, and they only exist in the original language, you really have to feel that you can learn that language and navigate around in that language. And yes, you can rely on other people, but in my case, a non-profit that started with almost no money, I wasn't going to be able to afford lots of translators and expensive advisors. So Children First was founded as a non-profit association, and my mission when I came to Zurich was to support parents as well as developing children, and that's very important because this is actually a bit like a private independent school. The parents' fees pay for everything, and the only way that I could generate the reserves that I needed to expand it was via working myself all day, every day with the children, teaching, organising, caring, etc., doing the admin in the evening. And the 5 children that I started with, their fees were the way that I paid the rent and paid the minimum cost and built up enough so that I could grow. And then after a year and a half, I managed to pay myself a salary, which was wonderful. So that's the first thing to say is, there's a lot that goes on before you start up, and then when you do start up, there's a lot of time when you might not make a lot of money. You have to have a vision, you have to have a plan, and you have to know that it will work. So we'll come to that in a second. Let me just show you these first slides of the children. So in the top left you have one of my first, who's a male childcare worker. He's now running a Montessori school in Croydon. He went back to the UK, and he was fantastic with the kids, fantastic with the parents, and he only worked for me a few hours a week, but we did a regular baking session. He had worked in hospitality before he became a childcare worker. So drawing on all the skills of anyone who's involved in your project, he used to do a regular baking session on a Friday afternoon. Then in the middle you've got an older child teaching other children to read, and that was really just playing at teaching. But of course it's fascinating if you start to teach children in a playful environment. Will they get it? Will they learn? Or will it be confusing? Actually, it was just a very easy fit, and many of you may know preschools in the UK where they combine learning very effectively with playing and with daycare. And we did dance, and we used the Montessori curriculum, bottom left, to organise the children's learning and to provide resources and inspiration. The decoration and the environment is always important. So the standard of the school premises, we had an old flat, but it was very bright and sunny, and we had a lino floor in the first place, which was incredibly practical, and it could be washed all the time, so that kept it very clean, which was good. But aesthetics are very important because customers make their decisions apparently in the first sort of few seconds after they've walked into a new place. So if they like the environment, then they're much more likely to listen to why they should buy. And then bottom right, these are the musical instruments that we made as one of our projects. The children I'm just incredibly proud of, because over the years they've had some great outcomes. They've gone on to lovely schools, they've done really well, or they've blossomed into interesting individuals, and they're very verbal, very articulate, and usually love being busy. So rather good behaviour if you keep them busy, these little ones. And then of course there's the community dimension, which I love, because that way people can make friends when they move abroad. It's really hard as parents to move abroad with children and not have any friends. No one to moan to at the end of the day, no one to share the boring work with. And at the end of the day, parenting is 24/7, preschools are just there during the daytime. So the community dimension was really important to me. And that was partly because I'd moved to Switzerland and had been in a situation with no support myself for years before I came to Zurich. And that was really, really tough. So I knew from my own experience what the customers might need and what they might appreciate. Success factors. The first one was some amazing people without whom I could never have travelled this journey. So I still like to say thank you to them indirectly by featuring them in my presentation. One of them used to travel an hour and 3/4 to work and back every day, and she managed to do that for nearly 4 years. Another lived around the corner, but heroically went from 1 baby to 7 young children within a very short space of time. I remember many evenings spent at work coming down after a long day. Another very important thing, of course, in a school is how you teach them and what you do. You've got to provide something interesting and slightly sophisticated, otherwise why would parents think that you're special? I mean, we are English, so native English is an advantage in Zurich, where the first language is German, and English is incredibly popular. But to start with, we were targeting expats who already spoke English. So the learning was the most important thing, I felt, for them. And finally, no matter what happens over the years, how our customers change, how the markets change, I must say that the quality aspect of it is what keeps me motivated. And I like this phrase, love and wisdom matter in every minute and in every sentence spoken to a child. So it's how things are said, it's not just what is said. But obviously the content has to be good, and it has to be truthful, and you don't want to make sort of empty threats or empty promises. And these little details of how you deliver education are the things that will bring the quality. And finding a way to monitor and assess them as well, which is quite hard. We have to encourage a lot of observation of each other and a lot of reflective feedback. So the quality assurance becomes a very local matter that really can't be done at a distance. So that's, then we have a few quotes, those wonderful things that people have said about us after they've left. Comments about the children, how they are and how they present themselves, and also what we've done for families over the years. And then we come on to what I see as it's a complete coincidence that I ended up in Zurich, where there are so many startups. Most startups in Zurich are tech startups. A lot of them are started by people who are 80% working, 20% not working. They're earning so much money that they can, take a day off every week and do their startup in that day. My startup wasn't that kind, but because there are so many startups here, I found this slide from a Swiss government event where they were talking about startups. And mine was definitely a lifestyle startup, working to live their passion. So I wanted to do something worthwhile that would get me out of bed in the morning, that would enable me to have the lifestyle I needed as a mother. A lot of flexibility, be my own boss, and generally juggle the sometimes competing demands of being a mother and working full time. It became a small business startup because I now live on that income and I'm dependent on it, but I only earn a salary. It's still not a profit-making business that will have a variable amount of profits I can keep, although most schools in this part of the world are. Most private schools are businesses rather than non-profits. But that gave me a lot of advantages at the beginning, because I don't know how many of you know Switzerland, but it's not a very easy place to live and start up as a foreigner. It's okay if you're doing something trendy, but preschools are basically not very high status even here. So you have to be able to prove yourself, and this has been a great advantage for me, knowing that I wasn't doing it in order to earn the money. I was doing it because I wanted to do a good job and to have the life that I wanted to lead. I would love it to move through the other startup types and become scalable and viable, but as yet that hasn't happened. We have grown, but we haven't because it's not very easy to replicate and become a federation of schools or nursery schools. We could be brought up, but the concept is very individual to us, so that would also be quite difficult at the moment. But we are definitely a social startup rather than a technical or an investing fund or something like that. Before you start then, imagine that you've got to do your planning and your research. I mean, it's as if you're going onto the Dragon's Den, and imagine all the questions people could ask you and have a good answer for them. And then do your due diligence, you know, the research. Who will your customers be? I had a lot of growth potential when I started. Now the market is quite saturated. Apparently, according to the City of Zurich, there are enough childcare places here because there aren't that many jobs that women want. It's quite a traditional society and there are very few part-time jobs. But that means that we have to diversify and develop different products and services if we really want to grow further. At the moment, we're kind of plateauing after our expansion. We knew that I knew I'd be able to deliver the product or service on time and at an agreed price because I was the one delivering it, so that was very easy, and I only employed people who were completely trustworthy. Either I knew them already or I worked alongside them in such close proximity that I could immediately tell. After we grew, I discovered that my recruitment checklist for how I was going to recruit staff was as long as that of a big multinational company. So recruiting the right staff is really key. And being able to recruit them and get more staff determines how quickly you can grow, of course. So that's an important factor to keep in mind. And then the recruitment market can change here. There are quotas on how many foreigners can come at any one time and how many can stay, and rules change as well over time. EU rules have changed. Second wave and third wave EU country citizens don't have the same rights in Switzerland as first wave citizens. So you learn all of these things once you know where you're going to be. Can I just ask how many, just for a quick, I don't know if you can look on the little menu, there's a little sort of raise hand symbol. How many of you are actually based in the UK? If you can answer. 4 at least, okay. Thank you. And how many, Janet, do I need to clear those in order to ask the next question?
Don't worry, I'll clear them. Thank you.
Okay. And how many of you are wanting to start a business up that's international but still be based in the UK without actually living abroad? How many of you just want an international business? Oh, okay. Okay, so you're actually quite keen on international businesses rather than necessarily moving abroad. Thanks, that's great to see. All right. And how many of you have startup experience? My last question before I carry on. Have any of you had a startup or have experience of starting something up? 3 of you, by the looks of it. Okay. All right. So there's actually quite a, you've got quite some experience in this, those of you who are here right now. So obviously the soundness of how much you can project ahead depends on how much you can find out from wherever you're based. I was already based in Zurich, so I could go to every other preschool. Nowadays there are so many websites you can find out a lot online, but people are often quite cagey about real prices and real costs. So it did help, and it's possible, of course, to travel somewhere just for a few months to do that research. You don't have to actually live there and move there and live there in order to do the research. But it's usually quite interesting for people to discover Switzerland because the salaries are so high here. So one person's salary can usually support a whole household rather than having to both have jobs. Nevertheless, I mean, for that reason, and I came over to Switzerland meaning to work and then found it very hard to get a suitable job with my background. And that was partly why I started up my own organisation. But even if you've got a partner who's willing to come or to be with you, or a family who are willing to be with you, they will still need to like the place and to be able to either work in the organisation you're running or to do something else. And it's not that easy in some places to more than one person to find a job, even if one person can. So I think it's quite an interesting question, you know, how people end up living abroad and why you'd want to start your own organisation up if you're not already in that country, because a lot of things really depend on you having some first-hand experience and knowledge of the place. It depends on the nature of the business, of course. Here you can see assessment of intellectual property rights. Well, there wasn't any intellectual property really in what I did. There was a need though for a contingency plan. I mean, my list of shall I do it, shall I not do it, they were both as long as each other. It was a really hard decision going for it, because once you take contractual obligations, you just don't have any way of turning back within the notice period on those obligations. So you have to be fairly confident before you start up that you're going to be able to cover your costs, or at least not get burnt too badly. I don't think that entrepreneurship is just taking risks. I think it's taking calculated risks. And in my case, the 5 children I started with were enough to cover my costs. So I knew from the beginning that I wasn't sort of running to stand still. I was just doing a job that I was confident in, and it allowed me enough energy to put more time into it than the job actually needed, so that I could grow it and establish it in the local community. And of course, outside work, I was going to every single event I could with my son that related to my work. So that's another thing to think about. You can't always do startups that enable you to work on them 24/7, like you can when you're a parent. So this is a very particular kind of commitment that I had to this social organisation. Going on to the financial planning, well, budgets are hard to draw up. There was lots of admin time that you can't calculate. You might make mistakes. People might give you wrong information. Things might change. So there are those hidden costs that you can't always predict. And then there's the sheer cost of not having time to do anything else. So because you are so busy running something new, you end up spending, I don't know, £50 on something that you could have probably made yourself for 5. So there are so many things like that you have to cultivate a sort of relaxed frame of mind about the money somehow. You've got to build in a bit of a cushion so that you can really sort of throw yourself at the project. But of course it's great fun and it's very satisfying if it goes in the direction you want it to. So the first question to ask is, can I afford to do this? Who will pay you? How will you pay? How will you invest your time? Have you got some savings? Is someone else supporting you financially? Have you got some money from a previous job? It will cost money to move abroad. Even that, when candidates come to me to the school and they're moving abroad, I say to them, your first salary won't come in until the end of the first month. You'll have to pay the deposit on your flat. You'll have to, there are all sorts of costs involved in an international move. So just be aware that, it's an investment. You spend money at the beginning, but obviously the return is much greater later on. I think I've already covered this really, travelling versus family support. It depends on your life stage as to whether you really want to do this now and why. Some people have no choice. I didn't have a lot of choices. There weren't a lot of jobs I was recognised as an expert in, and one of those was infant and child development, because of one of the diplomas I had from the UK when I arrived. It was recognised by the Swiss authorities. But if you do have choices, there are people around me here who have lots of choices. There are a lot of social startups here. One, for example, is birthing courses for couples, and the lady only runs maybe 1 course a month. And that is enough for her to cover her costs or whatever. That's her startup. So combining, your love of travelling with working and the amount of time you have to enjoy the experience once you get there, it really depends what your motivation is. I was not interested in anything other than a fairly sort of major project. I needed something that was an outlet for my energy. Some people don't want to do it in that way. It would be perfectly valid to just run a new small project for 6 months or for a year. My minimum investment of time was 5 years. You can't really grow a school in less than 5 years. So I had to have 3 to 5 years ahead of me when I was willing to commit And that made it really difficult, given that my son was still very young and I didn't know where he was going to go to school. So there were lots of unknowns. In that way, you have to be a little bit of a risk taker and willing to sort of jump in, I think, with your feet first. But you can combine culture with family life. So wherever you go, you can learn languages together, you can work on your startup together, and providing people are with you who will provide you with your mental or emotional support, or with, you know, online channels nowadays, you can get a lot of backup from friends and family back home. But you do need to have some kind of support, because if you start a startup, there are big liabilities and responsibilities, and if things go badly wrong, you know, you might well feel that your reputation is on the line, for example, or that you'll create a big hole in your CV. So it's worth thinking about before you start. How will I ensure that, you know, I'll be all right in the good times as well as in the bad? Then languages. How will you understand your customers? What languages do they speak? It is a long-term project, learning a language, and cultural understanding only comes with a lot of time. But you've got to sort of skip that stage a bit with a startup. You've got to target audiences that you understand. And if you don't understand their language, that's going to be quite a challenge, actually. So we started with all English-speaking parents, and now almost all of our parents are German-speaking. So that has shifted over the 10 years. And German is on my daily to-do list, and I never stop learning. It doesn't matter how much German I learn, it's never enough. And I tell you, it can become a little bit wearing after all this time. But I knew someone who used to get up at 5 in the morning, study German till 7, and then go to work. He got a job in the post office in the management part of their bank. And I can tell you that he would not have done so well in his job if he hadn't been willing to learn the language in that very intensive way. So yeah, it takes a definite sort of effort to span language and cultural gaps. Then, who are your investors? Well, in a social startup, you know, yourself, you're your own main investor, but you know, I had friends who came to me and said, oh, what a great idea, there's definitely a need for this, it definitely has growth potential, I'd be willing to invest. I didn't take any money from anyone, actually, but I did, oh sorry, is that a sign that someone wants to say something? Got a little, oh no, it's disappeared, okay. Yeah, so I didn't actually take money from anyone, but I did, you know, welcomed the support and kept those people in touch with how it was going. And actually, in my case, we were a little bit ahead of the curve, and it was a great time. So it did just go from strength to strength, and within a few years, I was full and looking for bigger premises. And it took me another few years to find the big premises that I needed. And then it was, you know, almost too big the place we have now, because the market has changed, and so we don't completely fill it. But it doesn't matter, you know, for the business, it's fantastic. We've grown. It's always then got some growth potential if you're not absolutely completely full in a school. And you don't sort of constantly keep having to move, which is a nightmare for schools, to have to move schoolhouse all the time. So I'm quite happy with how it's been and how it's gone without investors, but I could have had them. And I certainly had advisors and translators. I had friends who were willing to do things for free. I did something for them, they did something for me. It was just a really exciting time. Sometimes you can ask friends to do a bit of consultancy or advice work for you on a pro bono basis, so just for free. But because you say that and because you stipulate that you're asking them to do something for free, you're recognizing that, you know, you would pay them if you could. So obviously, it's not quite the same as just doing someone a favor. You're treating it as a piece of serious work. You know, finally, as I said before, you need to calculate the risk. I would have lost a bit of time. I would have, you know, got my fingers burnt. I think I would have harmed my confidence if I hadn't made it a success. But I didn't have a huge amount financially at stake, whereas most businesses, I get the impression in Zurich, you know, really require a minimum sort of 50,000 francs to start up. There are companies and there are government organisations here that help you when you start up, so that's something worth thinking about if you decide you want to do this. Because wherever you go, there might be a government agency saying, oh yes, we'd like to encourage people to start up things here, so we will advise them on, how to pay social insurance or which legal vehicle to choose, or we will give them a free bit of office space for them to make their first deals or whatever. So there are people in places where you can go who will help you calculate the risk. And I quite like this cartoon because it's all about how you take the advice, how positively you feel and how positively your advisors feel, and how much you'll be influenced. Tell the engineer to stop making you sad. I have some fake revenue projections to cheer you up. At the beginning, there's an awful lot which is completely conjured out of thin air. That's why I say the due diligence is so important. You have to know which figure to drop into that blank Excel box when you're thinking, how much will I spend on food, or how much will we charge for school fees. You've got to have done some research, because otherwise it really could be a disaster. So on that sort of very boring, rather swift sort of note, I just conclude. So you will get in the presentation top 10 tips as the last slide, but they really run through what I've already covered. Do your planning and your research, make budgets and work out what to put in it, think about your family support, think about whether your business is really local or national or international, because mine is really a local business that I do abroad, and that's quite different from an international business, which is, for example, import and export, which requires a whole different set of environmental scanning. For those of you doing business courses, I'm sure that's on your course, just to keep in touch with what's happening out there in the big world. And in our case, if the number of expats coming to Zurich massively drops, or if their nationality changes because the Swiss suddenly decide to all come back home, then the products that we're providing for that audience has got to change in order to survive. So yes, whether your product is local or national or international, whether the regulations you'll be governed by are local or national or international, these are all things that need to be thought about. Then there's the languages, so putting the time in to learn and to keep learning. Thinking about the role of investors, calculating your risk, and having a kind of cushion for the risks that you can't predict. What will your cushion be, or how will you cope if the worst happens? What's your rainy day plan? And the last thing, I think I made this number 9 on my top 10 tips, but it's something I've come back to again and again throughout my career, is just self-awareness. How do you know it would suit you? Would this business idea really fit with the person you are? And at every stage, I think, when you're running a business, there's always the opportunity to get feedback from colleagues to realise, so I realised that I was not the sort of person to stay with the same school for 20 years, and I was likely to want new ideas and new things. So, and yet the school is completely permanent and fixed in one place, and there is no chance that I can keep doing new projects and changing things. So we have a rotating program of fun weeks and community events and different little new projects. Last year we had a charity event for refugees, a fundraiser which we'd never done before, and I'd always thought I'd never do it. And then when we did it, it was wonderful, and we learned something from the experience. So I channel my need for new things into new projects and new services and new events at the school. And I'm always keeping a lookout for new training courses I could run, or interesting organisations that are coming into the landscape. And so in this way, I'm not just a nursery school head, I'm sort of a project manager at the same time. And, I'm still wearing 10 different hats. They're not so big, but I can delegate everything. So, that's just a part of my startup, is that it's a small quality place, and quality often does stay small. But, in other ways, small is beautiful, and that doesn't bother me at all. So in my mind, I'm very lucky to have been able to do this and to have been able to do it for so long. I really had a wonderful first few years of complete sort of success and expansion, and a lot of hard work, proving myself and establishing the reputation and making sure that Children First could remain good, through different phases of development and through different staff teams that come and gone. So I think that my 10 years has then led me to want to do things like this, to encourage other people to do it, and to talk about it and hopefully answer your questions, if you have any questions for me now.
Okay.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you very much, Monica. That was really interesting. I think it just proves one point that probably everybody realises, that you have to work extremely hard to set up your own business. One of the questions I actually thought while we were going through this is, I wondered, do you think that it's more difficult to, say, set up a business internationally than it is to, say, set up one in the UK?
Well, I think it depends on your situation, because in my situation with a young child, it was really hard not having any family around. So, if you've got a member of staff who's off sick, basically you have to, somehow you've got to open up on time, you've got to deliver. And the only way I could do that would be for me to go with my son to the school physically and open up, for example, in that situation. Or if there was a deadline and if my son was ill and I was working against the deadline, it would be a disaster, because I would just have a complete conflict and not have anyone I could fall back on, really. I had friends, but when your child's ill, you can't really, unfortunately, you can't avail yourself of the help of just friends. It really would have to be your mom or family. So that made it very tough at the sort of difficult moments. But in other ways, it's easier because you don't have the same risk of, the reputational risk is smaller at the beginning, because absolutely no one knows you. So whatever happens, whatever mistakes you make, you can move on from those quickly. They're not going to stay with you in your network, as your established network of contacts, and people will remember it forevermore. It really is a new start. So, I was lucky I didn't have any disasters, but I think that gives you a certain freedom, and sometimes it really brings out the best in people if they feel they can start completely fresh.
That's an interesting point, Monica. Thank you. I have one more question, actually, because I actually wondered, you were talking about your staff in an earlier slide. Was that very complicated? Were there lots of laws surrounding employing people in Zurich? It must have been quite difficult.
Yes, that required quite a bit of new learning, actually, because the quota system here is unlike anything I've come across anywhere else. And they're so strict about employment regulations here and immigration and work permits and things that, people have only started thinking about in the UK relatively recently. But they're so strict and have always been that everyone you speak to says, oh, be careful, you could get arrested if you do the wrong thing. The police will come and knock at your door, and, you've had it if you don't do the right thing. So I spent, a long time reading about employment regulations and quotas and asking people and ringing offices and finding a way through the language barrier, because at the beginning I didn't speak German. And it was really tough, but it was really important, because by doing it right, it meant that 7 years after I started up, when we finally had our first spot inspection, which means that someone comes and knocks at the door, they've got a little machine with them, and they ID everyone in the building. So they ask everyone for their name, their ID, they have to go and get their passport or their ID card, show that they are legally working in Switzerland. They have to sign saying that they're telling the truth. You have to sign saying you are, you've complied with the law and that you've employed everyone legally. And it's a really terrifying experience, because they, you can imagine, they're not particularly friendly. And if you haven't really done your research and your homework, you don't really know if everyone is absolutely legal according to all of those detailed regulations. You really could have your school closed down. So I was ever so glad that I put all of that time in at the beginning to understand it. And then the first administrator I got, she only worked for me 1 morning a week, you know, in a tiny amount of time. But one of her main jobs was to learn about all of the employment regulations that I had learned about, so that if something came up with a new employee, you know, she would be able to back me up when I was teaching the children or working with the children. But I'll tell you I had a terrible experience once. A cleaner who was working for me moved house, and I didn't know that when you move house in Switzerland, you have to move your permit. You have to move your work permit to the new local authority. It has to be processed by them. I had no idea about this. Anyway, this cleaner didn't do it properly, or if she did do it, she fudged it, or she lied, or something went wrong. And she didn't have a legal permit, even though she had had one originally. So then she was stopped in the street. She was, you know, like all of her 10 employers were prosecuted. I had to clear my name, but I was up against a criminal charge because in Switzerland it is a criminal offence to employ.
Goodness, that's quite serious, isn't it?
It is really serious. You know, it was like 1.5 years out of my career when I was thinking, is this worth it? I think I just want to go home. You know, because whenever I thought about it, I thought, I didn't even know that she'd moved house, so how could I have possibly known, you know, that I needed to ask her for a new permit, even if I had known that regulation. Anyway, it took 1.5 years to clear my name, to actually say, no, this employer didn't know that she had, you know, moved house. There's no way they could have known this because it was a piece of paper caught between 2 local authorities, you know, and it took me, yeah, not just the time, but it cost 12,000 francs. Which is about £8,000 to fight that and to clear my name. So that's just a cleaner who worked for us, you know, 1.5 hours a week or something.
Well, that's really interesting, Monica. It just shows you some of the pitfalls that you can come up against.
Yeah, and you know, you don't know how these things will be reported, so people don't report them very favourably. They don't say, oh, you know, this employer had no idea and then she soon learned, you know, that this is one of the regulations you have to be mindful of. You know, the reporting would go more along the lines of, you know, how awful, you know, kindergarten illegally employs a cleaner, you know, or something like that. So you really have to be careful with the mistakes that you make. You've got to be really clear as to why you made them and think through, you know, how not to make them again. Introduce a process and an administrative procedure in Switzerland. That's very important, that you have a procedure that proves that you are trying to do the right thing, you know. So yeah, that taught me a lesson, I can tell you.
Well, I'm glad it's worked out okay for you, Monica, and we've just about run out of time, so I'd like to say thank you very much for your time today. It was a very interesting talk, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it. I will be sending out a recording next week, so I'm sure that many other people who have registered will have a listen to what you've said. So it just remains for me to say I hope you all enjoy the rest of your lunch hour, what's left of it, and thank you, Monica.
Thank you very much. I can see a raised hand there, but I'm hoping that that's not someone who wanted to say something.
No, I think David's had his hand up most of the time. I haven't learned quite how to take them down. I thought I knew, but I didn't. Anyway, thank you all. And
thank you very much, Janet, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.